Probably the overall most common verse that Muslims use to show that Islam is a religion of peace is, of course, Surah 2, 256, which that's where we get, there is no compulsion in religion. Let me read to you what the verse says. There is no compulsion in religion. Truly, the right way has become clearly distinct from error. Therefore, whoever disbelieves in Satan and believes in Allah, he indeed has laid hold on the firmest handle, which shall not break off, and Allah is hearing, knowing. So, there is no compulsion in religion. We hear this over and over and over again from Muslims like Shabir Ali and Jamal Badawi and organizations like CARE. There's no compulsion in religion. How could you say that Islam promotes violence towards anyone? Well, if this were the only verse in the Quran, if this were the only verse where the Quran ever addresses how you are to deal with unbelievers, I would say, all right, you've got a point. This certainly sounds like Islam is a religion of peace. The problem is, this isn't the only verse in the Quran, and if we follow the methodology laid down in the Quran itself, we see that this verse has absolutely nothing to do with how Muslims are to live in the world today. Now, there are tons of interpretations of Surah 2, 256. The main interpretation of it is that when you apply the methodology laid down in the Quran to it, you see it doesn't apply. And here's why. In Islam, if you read the Quran, you find all kinds of passages that seem to contradict one another. Is this a problem? Well, the Muslim says no, because in Islam, there is the rule of abrogation. There's a doctrine called abrogation. If a verse comes later, and it seems to conflict with a verse that came earlier, then it's the later verse that applies, and the former verse has been canceled. God has given something better. And we find this in Surah 16, 101. We find it in Surah 2, 106, where Allah specifically says, when we cancel one of the former verses, it's because we're giving you something better. And so Muslims know, Muslims who understand the Quran know, that if you find two verses and they seem to conflict with one another, all you have to do is go to the Sirah literature, go to the Hadith, go to the commentaries, see which verse was revealed last, and that's the verse that applies to Muslims in the world today. So, Surah 2, 256, is that a verse that applies today? Was this one of the last verses that was revealed? Or could perhaps another verse, such as Surah 9:5 or Surah 9:29, which command Muslims to fight unbelievers because they're unbelievers, do one of these passages hold for Muslims today? Well, let me give you the words of Ibn Kathir, one of the greatest, the greatest Sunni Islamic commentator of all time. Commenting on this verse, on Surah 2, 256, he says, this verse is abrogated by the verse of fighting. You shall be called to fight against a people given to great warfare, then you shall fight them or they shall surrender, 48:16. Allah also says, O Prophet, strive hard against the disbelievers and the hypocrites and be harsh against them, 973. And he says, O you who believe, fight those of the disbelievers who are close to you and let them find harshness in you and know that Allah is with those who are pious. So according to Ibn Kathir, this verse, because it came so early, was abrogated by later commands which clearly call Muslims to fight unbelievers because they're unbelievers. And Ibn Kathir, again, the greatest Sunni commentator, concludes with this. Therefore, all people of the world should be called to Islam. If any one of them refuses to do so or refuses to pay the jizya, they should be fought till they are killed. Call people to Islam. This is the rule that applies to Muslims today based on the later revelations, verses like 9:29. You call them to Islam. If they refuse to come to Islam and they refuse to pay the jizya, you fight them until they are dead. Now think about this. Muslims in the West are saying, no, in Islam, it's a religion of peace because of Surah 2, 256. Well, according to the methodology laid down in the Quran and according to your greatest commentators, this verse no longer applies. Why are you pretending that it does? Because Muslims in the West are allowed to practice taqiyya. They're allowed to deceive us in order to keep us from knowing the truth about Islam.
جنوب تا شمال و از شرق تا غرب یک فریاد است و اون مرگ بر امریکا. نفرت و خشم ملت مسلمان بر امریکا رژیم کفر شیطان.
والله may Allah bomb you, may Osama bin Laden bomb you, may Osama bin Laden bomb you. We love you, Osama, we love you. والله جهاد في سبيل الله. أسامة أنت ولد يا رجال يا من. أسامة أنت ولد يا من. لا إله إلا الله. They will bomb you and والله we will be with them. We will take revenge on you. الله أكبر, الله أكبر, Allah. Open the borders of Denmark so we can invade their country and take their wives and war booty. Allah Akbar, Allah Akbar.
George Bush, go to hell!
USA, go to hell!
USA, go to hell!
Nuke Denmark! We will bomb Bin Laden! We will bomb Bin Laden! Denmark, watch your back! Denmark, watch your back! Bin Laden's coming back! Bin Laden's coming back! Bin Laden's coming back! Bin Laden's coming back! Who is the terrorist?
Hello, America. I'm just a few hundred feet from Ground Zero, where a group of Muslim terrorists crashed 2 planes into the World Trade Center, killing close to 3,000 people. 9 years later, 2 groups of Muslims, the Cordoba Initiative and the American Society for Muslim Advancement, are planning to build a massive 13-story mosque right here behind me. Now, understandably, many people here in the West are concerned that this isn't an attempt to honor the families of 9/11, as the Muslims here are claiming. Instead, it may be an attempt to build a symbol of Islamic victory. Now, I have the same concern, but mine is slightly different. My concern is based, for the most part, on a photograph I saw while I was still in college. When I was in college, my best friend was a Muslim named Nabil Qureshi. Nabil showed me some photographs shortly after the September 11th attacks, and I found them quite surprising. Muslims were passing these photographs around, and Nabil thought that they were absolutely hilarious. The first photograph was a picture of George W. Bush as a Muslim, and I have to admit, that one was actually pretty funny. George W. looked like he had joined the Taliban. The second photograph wasn't so funny. It was a photoshopped picture of the Statue of Liberty covered in a full veil. Now, this one bothered me a little bit. It was the Statue of Liberty, a symbol of freedom and justice, covered by a full veil, a symbol of oppression and Sharia law. Now, these 2 pictures actually work their way around the internet, so lots of people are familiar with them. The third picture is the one that really disturbed me, however. It was a photoshopped picture of New York City covered in mosques and minarets. In the bottom corner, it said, New York City, 2006. The idea was that the terrorist attacks had cleared the ground for the construction of new mosques. Now, when I asked Nabil why he found this photograph so funny, he said, "Am I the only one who's dealing with this tragedy through humor?" But that really didn't work. People who dealt with 9/11 through humor made fun of the terrorists. They didn't joke about terrorist attacks clearing the way for a new Mecca. So this was when I first realized, this is when I realized for the first time, that there are 2 forces at work within Western Muslims like Nabil. On the one hand, Nabil was born and raised in the United States. His father had been in the US military. He loved America. But on the other hand, even though he came from the most peaceful sect of Islam, there was something in Nabil that allowed him to smile when there were terrorist attacks. Now, those of you who know personally, who know Muslims close enough to where they can tell you what they really think, you know this is actually quite common. Good citizens in public, not so good citizens in private. Interestingly, this dual Muslim nature is advocated in the Quran. If you turn to Surah 3, verse 28, you'll see that the Quran says, "Let not the believers take disbelievers as their friends in preference to believers. Whoso doeth that hath no connection with Allah, unless it be that ye but guard yourselves against them, taking as it were security." So if you're a Muslim, you're not supposed to be friends with unbelievers unless it's to protect yourself. What this means is that if Muslims feel threatened by a stronger adversary, say the United States of America, they can pretend to be friendly in order to protect themselves, in order to guard themselves against these unbelievers. The greatest Islamic commentator of all time, Ibn Kathir, comments on Surah 328, and he says that when Muslims are outnumbered by a stronger adversary, believers are allowed to show friendship outwardly, but never inwardly. He goes on to quote Muhammad's companion Abu Darda, who said, "We smile in the face of some people, although our hearts curse them." So if Muslims are in an area where they're outnumbered, they're supposed to have 2 faces. Inwardly, they're supposed to hate the unbelievers and to long for the day when Islam will dominate. Outwardly, they are allowed to pretend to be peaceful and tolerant and kind and loving, smiling in our faces while cursing us in their hearts. What's my point, you ask? Well, the Muslims who want to construct a massive mosque here assure us that they're doing it to honor the victims of 9/11 and not to construct a symbol of Islamic supremacy. They assure us that they're going to build a beacon of understanding and harmony, a place for people of all faiths to gather and condemn extremism. Do you believe that? If so, I'd like to sell you a bottle of Wood's Miracle Magic Cure-All from the Miracle Springs of Poland for the low, low price of $487. My friends, what did Muslims do when they conquered Mecca? They went to the Kaaba, the center of pagan worship, and they claimed it for Islam. What did Muslims do when they took Jerusalem? Where did they build their mosque? They built it on the Temple Mount. When Muslims conquered Damascus, where did they build their mosque? They demolished the Church of St. John the Baptist and replaced it with a mosque. Why? When you Islamize the most important places of your enemy, you destabilize your enemy, you make them weaker, and you show them that Muslims are in control. Now, the mosque that's being built here. We don't have a religious center in the United States of America, but we do have an economic center. The heart of that economic center was the World Trade Center, which was destroyed by Muslims. And now Muslims want to construct a massive mosque. Why? To honor the victims of 9/11? Keep in mind, this was in the minds of Muslims all along. Right after the September 11th attacks, Muslims were joking about filling the city with mosques. And now they tell us that they're doing it to honor the victims of 9/11. Smiling in our faces while cursing us in their hearts. Come out of the cave, America. It's dark in there.